Hey, good day to you. This is Todd. I am a regular dude walking in the Word. We're talking about Genesis right now, and this is episode 101 here. And today it's entitled Laban, Not a Father You Would Want. Okay? We're going to be focusing today on this section here that we're reading. And it's really talking a lot about Laban and how he acts toward Jacob. Okay? Remember, Jacob was known as a deceiver. Okay? Now he comes here to Laban's household, and now he's met his match because Jacob was a great deceiver, but he's going to find out Laban is even more of a deceiver, okay? Just all these things. Let's read through it so you can follow along here and see how crazy this is. And this is taken from Genesis 29, verses 15 to 30, okay? So follow along in your Bibles with me. Let's read. After Jacob had stayed with him for a whole month, Laban said to him, "Just because you are a relative of mine, should you work for me for nothing? Tell me what your wages should be." Now, how do you like this? This is a funny way of saying it. So Jacob had come there as a guest, okay? And remember, he didn't come with anything. He obviously didn't have a tent. And he didn't have animals that needed water and all that. He basically came with, like, you might say, a backpack on, okay? And so he came with nothing, and he's there at the house, just enjoying, being a guest at the house of Laban, and he's there for a month. Now, Laban is like, doesn't want any freeloaders, staying there. So notice the way he puts this. He said after he'd been there a month, Laban said to him, should you work for me for nothing? Realistically, he probably wasn't working. He was probably doing a few things around there. Tell me what your wages should be. So he's saying, hey, you shouldn't work for me for free. In fact, you probably should work for me. What should your wages be? Okay. Interesting way to get him off the sofa, you might say. Verse 16, now Laban had two daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Remember, Rachel, we had been introduced earlier. She came to the well and met Jacob. Leah had weak eyes. Now, the different translations and the way this is said, any way you look at it, it's not. It doesn't reflect favorably on Leah. Okay, some translators would say she had weak eyes, like her eyes were cross-eyed, or she couldn't see well and was almost blind, or she hurt your eyes to look at her because she was so ugly. Okay, but anyway, she wasn't a desire. It gives you the picture. She wasn't the most desirable woman. Okay. But it says, but Rachel had a lovely figure and was beautiful. So the way it contrasts it was, you have a Rachel, or Leah, who made your eyes hurt when you looked at her, or, she was cross-eyed or something like that. But Rachel, she was really nice to look at, okay? Jacob was in love with Rachel and said, I'll work for you for 7 years in return for your younger daughter, Rachel. Okay, he came there and he didn't have any money or anything, so he needed like a dowry, to marry her. And he's like, what should I do? How about I work for you for 7 years? Okay, so, and this is what Laban says, verse 19. Laban said, "It is better that I give her to you than to some other man. Stay here with me." So Jacob served 7 years to get Rachel, but they seemed like only a few days to him, because of his love for her. Okay, it spells it out pretty clear right there that the deal was you work for 7 years and you get Rachel. Okay, that's the way it's spelled out. But Laban will twist this around. Verse 21, then Jacob said to Laban, "Give me my wife. My time is completed and I want to make love to her." Okay, so Laban wasn't like counting down the days, but Jacob sure was, okay? And he was like, time's up. I've worked for you 7 years. It's time for me to have Rachel, okay? So, verse 22. So Laban brought together all the people of the place and gave a feast. But when evening came, he took his daughter Leah and brought her to Jacob, and Jacob made love to her. And Laban gave his servant Zilpah to his daughter as an attendant. Okay? He does the little, he's a trickster and does the switcheroo, okay? After or during the wedding ceremony or whatever. She was probably veiled, and then, they're in a dark tent, I guess, to consummate the marriage, and, it's Leah in there. So keep in mind, Leah had to be involved with this too, okay, to know this was going on. Verse 23, when morning came, there was Leah. So Jacob said to Laban, "What is this you have done to me? I served you for Rachel, didn't I? Why have you deceived me?" He wakes up in the morning, he's like, what? You're Leah. What are you doing here? I've been deceived, okay? Verse 26, so Laban replied, "It is not our custom here to give the younger daughter in marriage before the older one. Finish this daughter's bridal week, then we will give you the younger one also in return for another 7 years of work." Okay? This probably, when he said this, it probably struck Jacob like home, like, oh, firstborn gets everything and the secondborn doesn't. And he's like, this is going back to how he deceived his father, and now Laban has received him. Notice, and Laban didn't say anything about that custom at all until like after, the wedding day. I like that. So he's all deceitful about it, but Jacob knows that he's been deceived. But Laban says, hey, stay with her for this bridal week and the marriage week here. And then at the end of the week, I'm going to give you the other one too. Okay, my other daughter too. And you can work another 7 years. Okay, so in 2 weeks' time, he got 2 wives. All right. And Jacob did so. He finished the week with Leah, and then Laban gave him his daughter Rachel to be his wife. Laban also gave his servant Bilhah to his daughter Rachel as her attendant. Jacob made love to Rachel also, and his love for Rachel was greater than his love for Leah, and he worked for Laban another 7 years. Okay, let's talk about Laban here. Laban is, I want you to see here, he's not a guy that we should model our lives after. First of all, he was a man of great deceit. Okay, so it was obvious through this whole thing, he quickly had this custom that he never mentioned to Jacob at all until 7 years had passed. You would think in the 7 years you would mention that custom sometime along the way, like, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you that we have a custom that the first daughter gets married before the second one. But no, didn't mention that at all. Okay, so he's a man of deceit with this whole thing. He's a man also driven by greed. Okay, so we saw that take place in the last time, and we saw it take place like years ago when his sister was married off, and he's driven by greed. Okay, so that's the first two things. The last thing, the way he treats his daughters. Okay, he treats his daughters a little higher than slaves, which was common back in that time period to do that. But he marries them off to the same man, not caring about, their future necessarily, but he is just like throwing them out there to Jacob here. Not looking out for their best interest necessarily, but looking out for his best interest. Like, how can I get 14 years of labor out of this guy? Well, I'll marry my daughters. And he's quick to, do the switcheroo and get Leah married, and then also Rachel, and to throw him off to the same man. Now, you're going to see that this union of these two sisters married to this one man is not a harmonious thing where everything works out great. It is strife starting off like probably in those 2 weeks of marriage. from that point on, it's constant strife that's happening. And you're going to see that spelled out later on here, especially when they start to have children. It's like, uh-oh, or, there's a war going on here. And so Laban basically threw his daughters into that mess. All right. So that's the third thing, about Laban. So those are just some things that I saw here that it's not a good thing to try and be like Laban in the story. All right. So thank you for watching. I'm just a regular dude walking in the Word, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow as we continue our journey through Genesis. Lord's blessing. I'll see you then.